A Terrible Vengeance. Chapter 4. Mr. Gage on Portents. About the time when poor distraught Mrs. Heath, having managed to elude the vigilance of that cleverest of men, Maria Pointer's husband, had run out of her small house, and was enlisting the sympathies of gossip-loving Shepperton at Lucy's disappearance, Mr. Paul Murray arrived at Liverpool Street Station, where his luggage and his valet awaited him. "Get tickets, Davis," he said. I have run it rather close," and he walked towards Smith's stall, while his man went into the booking office. As he was about to descend the stairs, Davis became aware of a very singular fact. Looking down the steps, he saw precisely the same marks that had amazed him so short a time previously, being printed hurriedly off by a pair of invisible feet, which ran to the bottom and then flew as if in the wildest haste to the spot where Mr. Murray stood. "I am not dreaming, am I?" thought the man, and he shut his eyes and opened them again, and the footprints were all gone. At the moment his master turned from the bookstall and proceeded towards the train, a porter opened the door of a smoking carriage, but Murray shook his head and passed on. Mr. Davis, once more looking to the ground, saw still following. There was not very many passengers, and it was quite plain to him that whoever his master went, the quick, wet prince went too. Even on the steps of the compartment Mr. Murray eventually selected, the man beheld a mark, as though someone had sprung in after him. He secured the door, then walked away, to find a place for himself, marvelling in a dazed state of mind what it all meant. Indeed, he felt so much dazed that, after he had found a seat to his mind, he did not immediately notice an old acquaintance in the opposite corner, who affably inquired, "Oh, and how is Mr. Davis?" Thus addressed, Mr. Davis started from his reverie, and exclaimed, "Why, bless my soul, Gage, who'd have thought of seeing you here?" After which exchange of courtesies, the pair shook hands gravely, and settled down to converse. Mr. Davis explained that he was going down with his governor to Norwich, and Mr. Gage stated that he and the old general had been staying at Thorpe, and were on their way to Lowestoft. Mr. Gage and his old general had also just returned from paying a round of visits in the west of England. "Pleasant enough, but slow," finished the gentleman's gentleman. "After all, when the season are out of it, there's no place like London." With this opinion Mr. Davis quite agreed, and said he only wished he had never to leave it, adding, "We have not been away from before a long time, and we should not be going away we are now bound if we had not to humour some fancy of our grandmother's." "Deuced rough on a man having to humour a grandmother's fancy," remarked Mr. Gage. "No female ought to have left the control of money," said Mr. Davis with conviction. "See what the consequences have been in this case. Mr. Murray outlived her son, who had to ask her for every shilling he wanted, and she's so tough she may see the last of her grandson." "Oh, yeah, that's very likely," agreed the other. "He looks awfully bad." "Oh, you saw him now, I suppose?" "Oh, no, but I saw him last night at Chertsey Station, and I could but notice the change in his appearance." For a moment Mr. Davis remained silent. Chertsey Station? What could his master have been doing at Chertsey? It was a question he would have put to himself again, and answered for himself at some convenient time. Meanwhile he only answered, "Yes, I observed an alteration in him myself. Anything fresh in the paper?" "No," answered Mr. Gage, handing his friend over the Daily News. The print he affected. "Everything is as dull as ditch water." For many a mile Davis read, or affected to read. Then he laid the paper aside, and after passing his case, well filled with the tithe levied on Mr. Murray's finest cigars, to Gage, began solemnly, "I'm going to ask you a curious question, Robert, as from man to man." "Oh, ask on," said Mr. Gage, striking a match. "Do you believe in warnings?" The old general's gentleman burst out laughing. He was so tickled that he let his match drop from his fingers and applied. "I'm afraid most of us have to believe in them, whether we like it or not," he answered, when he could speak. "Has there been some little difference between you and your governor, then?" "Oh, no, you mistake," was the reply. "I did not mean warnings in the sense of notice, but warnings as, warnings. You understand? Bother me if I do. Yes, now I take you. Do I believe in coming events casting shadows before, as someone puts it? Has any shadows of a coming event been cast across you? No, nor across anybody as far as I know. But I've been thinking the matter over lately and wondering if there can be any truth in such notions. What notions? Why, that there are signs and such like sent from trouble is coming to anyone. Well, you may depend it is right enough that signs and tokens are sent. Almost every good family has its special warning. One has its mouse, another a black dog, a third some white bird, a fourth a drummer boy, and so on. There's no giving over facts, even if you don't understand them. Well, it's still very hard to believe. Well, there wouldn't be much merit in believing if everything were as plain as a pikestaff. You know what the Scotch minister said to his boy? The very devils believe and tremble. You wouldn't be worse than a devil, would you? Well, has any sign ever happened to you? Asked Davis. Oh, not exactly. But lots of people have told me that they have to them. For instance, old Seal, who drove the Dowager Empress of Ongar, till the day of her death, used to make out hair stand on end, talking about phantom carriages that drove away one after another from the door of Handelt House, and awakened every soul on the premise, night after night, till the old Earl died. It took 12 clergymen to lay that spirit. I wonder one wasn't enough, ejaculated Davis. Oh, there may have been 12 spirits, for all I know, returned Gage, rather puzzled by his view of the question. Oh, but anyway, there were 12 clergymen, with the bishop and his lawn-sleeves chief among them. And I once lived with a young lady's maid, who told me when she was a girl she made her home with her father's parents, and on winter's night, after everybody had gone to bed, she sat up to make some girdle bread. That's the sort of bread people, well, where she came from, bake over a fire, on a round iron plate. Plenty of butter. It's not bad eating. Well, as I was saying, she was quite alone, and she had taken all the bread off, and was setting it up on the edge to cool, supporting one piece against the other, two and two, when on the table where she was putting the cakes, she saw one drop of blood fall, and then another and another, like the beginning of a shower. She looked to the ceiling, could see nothing. Still the drops kept on falling, slowly, slowly. And then she knew something had gone wrong with one dear to her, and she put a shawl over her head, and without saying a word to anybody, went through the loneliness and darkness of a night, all by herself to her father's. Well, she must have been a courageous girl, remarked Mr. Davis. Oh, she was. I liked her well. But to the point, when she reached the destination, she found her youngest brother dead. Now, what do you make of that? Why, it's strange, but I suppose she would have died all the same if she had not seen the blood drops. And I can't see any good of seeing them, did her? If she had reached her father's in time to bid brother good-bye, there would have been some sense in such a sign. As it is, it seems to me a lot of trouble thrown away. Mr. Gage shook his head. What a sceptic you are, Davis. But there, London makes sceptics of the best of us. If you had spent a winter, as I did once, in the Highlands of Scotland, beard the banshee wailing of the General's nephew in the county of Mayo, well, you wouldn't have asked what was used of a second sign of banshees. You might have just stood and trembled, as I did, many and many a time. I might, said Davis doubtfully, wondering what his friend would have thought of those wet little footprints. Hello, there's Peterborough. Hadn't we better stretch our legs, and a glass of something would be acceptable? Of that glass, however, Mr. Davis was not destined to partake. If one of you is Murray's man, said the guard as they jumped out, he wants you. I'll be back in a minute, observed Mr. Murray's man to his friend, and he hastened off. But he was not back in a minute. On the contrary, he never returned at all.